morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, people of LinkedIn. Good morning if you're watching us on YouTube. Good morning, Leighton.
Good morning.
We were already getting right stuck in there. I feel like we literally were like mid-flow talking about Black History Month, which we'll link to because the point that we were talking about was whether there is a general apathy, I guess, around some of this work, which we will definitely talk about. But good morning if you're joining us on this really cold morning. I've actually been out for a walk already, would you believe, Leighton, in the pitch black of dark.
I went out,
right?
saw the frost, and turned around.
Probably very sensible, but I went out. I've actually got I've got a family member. I've got my aunt staying with me over from France, and one of the things that she enjoys when she comes over is that we go out for these morning walks. So she was up with the birds, you know. We went out for walks. That was quite nice, but it is cold. It's a cold one. So good morning. If you're joining us live, please do say good morning. Let us know maybe how the weather is where you are. But I feel like I need to start off by saying belatedly, Happy International Men's Day, Leighton. And congratulations on you. And a massive congratulations and kudos. And I want to give you your flowers for running the first International Men's Day conference, at least here in the UK, possibly in the world, I want to say, right? I don't hear of many others.
No, we don't, and I think it's an interesting thing you said there about giving flowers, because one of the things that we did during the day was we actually paused and we explained a little stat to kind of give it some context of 84% of men only get flowers when they pass, and we gave everybody flowers. We went out into the crowd and we passed flowers to all the men, and it was a strange moment because there was this little awkwardness for moments of like, oh, I'm getting a flower, and then just this almost look of wow, and that after conversations afterwards, like, I've never had this. And one of the guests, Manny, was like, it's the first time in my life that I've been approached by a man in a pink suit bringing me a pink flower and celebrating me.
I absolutely love that you gave the men flowers. Well, I'm giving you your virtual flowers for sure today. We've got Jill. Good morning, Jill. Jill's joining us. Jill heads up D&I in the West Midlands, and your conference was in the West Midlands, and we'll maybe talk about why that was. And we've also got Dev, Hardev from Mia's Men. Good morning, Hardev. How are you doing? I want to know, Hardev, what were you doing for International Men's Day? I know maybe you were traveling. But I'm curious to know what you would do. And Jill, also, please let us know, what did you do for International Men's Day? I want to say, Jill, I think you've got a men's network, but if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I'm sure you have. So we've got a couple of men's networks on. I'm keen to hear, as I said in my post for this, you know, what have people done for International Men's Day? Because it's like the poor relation of the awareness days, and I'm quite fatigued actually of awareness days, so it's one I'm quite curious on. I'm going to read out Leighton's bio. Leighton, I have a tradition on here which you may have heard before, where I get ChatGPT to write your bio and then you get to rate it out of 10, right? So let me read this. So Leighton Reds Campbell is the founder of Work in Process CIC and the driving force behind the UK's first International Men's Day Conference and Expo. A community leader, facilitator, and advocate for men's well-being, Leighton has spent years creating safe, honest spaces where men can talk, grow, and reconnect. Through workshops, peer support, and partnerships across the West Midlands, he champions a compassionate, inclusive approach to men's mental health, fatherhood, identity, and allyship. His work challenges stigma, reframes masculinity, and brings people together to build stronger, healthier communities. Welcome, Leighton. How did ChatGPT do?
It's humbled me, I think. I never would have put it quite so. Yeah, it sounds a lot when you say that.
It's real.
Said, I'd have just said I'm a guy that just wants to be out there and help highlight men, you know, to help understand their own purpose. So amazing.
Fantastic.
I might use it.
Yeah, I'll send it to you afterwards. And Reds, is that a nickname for you, Reds?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I used to be a DJ many years ago, and I had hair then, and my hair
Oh.
was red. So
Oh,
yeah.
of course, of course. Okay. And Jill, you have got a men's network. Okay, cool. So we've got a couple of men's networks on. I'm really keen to hear what your men's networks did for International Men's Day and how it went. Like, I'm really keen to hear that because it'll just, for people that are maybe joining that whose organisations didn't do anything for International Men's Day, because there are lots of organisations that don't. It will maybe just give an idea of the sorts of things that you can do, as well as obviously, joining things like Leighton's event, which obviously the conference is just the first step in what's going to be like, other things, a whole movement really. Just talk about, I guess, the background to the conference. What made you want to run it? Why an International Men's Day conference?
So I think it started from going to International Women's Day. So I was there with a colleague and who kind of birthed the idea with me, Dee from Find Me a Solicitor. We were there with the stand. I was representing her stand and talking about what I do. Because I had a very I had a hoodie on, which was, everyone else's suit had a hoodie, and it was the Boys Get Sad 2 hoodie. So everyone's like, oh, what does this mean? So I explained what I did to lots of groups, and they were like very supportive and said that in women's spaces, particularly in women's spaces where they're looking at things like domestic abuse and women's support, that they said they get a lot of men that come to them and don't know where to send them. So that was kind of the first encouragement of this is a good thing that we're doing, and we're on the right path. And as we left, me and Dee had a conversation about shall we do the next International Men's Day, and we started out thinking as it'd be on a stand. And then we realized that it doesn't happen. And we looked again and okay, so maybe it's just not been advertised yet. Let's look at last year's and the year before. And whilst there were events that popped up, small events kind of for the day, there was nothing which was to kind of a similar aspect of conference and exhibition where you had those two kind of things together and publicised in that way. So, we approached the organisation in the UK and said, look, we want to do this. They were very supportive, said, great. Can't believe no one else has thought to do it in this way before. And yeah, we went for it.
Amazing. And I think I know the International Women's Day event that you're talking about. Was that this year? The one that was in, like, it was
Millennium
towards the end of
Point.
February, wasn't it? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I do know that. And it is a really interesting format, actually. And I like the fact that you sort of like took that in, where there's just a lot of free content. There are organizations that if people want to come and talk and they've got like a specific interest, they can actually talk to, people on the stands, etc., as well as the speakers in your conference. So I love that. Why? Because it was in lovely Wolverhampton, or Wolverhampton, as we say. We've got a couple
Wolverhampton,
of
yeah.
Wolverhampton. Why was it in the land of the yam yams? Why was it in
Interesting journey, really. So the original thoughts was, it needs to be in Birmingham. Second
Yeah.
city, lots of activity there, big audience. And we actually did have a very nice venue in Birmingham. Some challenges between one of our sponsors and the venue themselves meant that there was a long conversation for 3 months of whether we could do it there, whether we couldn't do it there, whether they're going to find another venue. And if I'm honest, I still don't 100% know why it was a challenge for them. I believe it was some internal challenges between them. So, and I made a little bit of, I own it as a mistake in that whilst we was going through that transition of where to do it, I kind of paused activity and thought, I need to wait for a venue. My kind of overthinking mind is, how can I tell people we're doing this if there's no venue? So I paused it, and then I had some personal challenges, and I kind of needed to take a step back for a while and think about, can I do this? Do I want to do this? Just in general, my life took a real wobble. And then a friend of mine basically turned around and said, you're not doing this for you. You're doing this for everybody else. And if we don't find a way to support you and get you into this space, then men are going to think that it's okay to give up when it's tough. And not from a man up and move on perspective, but how do we support you in this? So then that conversation was with Jonathan Leon, and I kind of flipped back on him and said, well, okay, so shall we use your venue? And he was like, oh, okay. And we thought about it, we're like, and then it was very much, it felt like another divine intervention. So the whole thing's been shaped by a walk of faith, and every obstacle that's come up, something has happened which has made it better. So being in Wolverhampton, it's my home. It's where I grew up. I love that people are trying to do more things here. It's a very diverse, multicultural society here. And again, it just added up. So the first International Men's Day was in 1999 in Trinidad and Tobago. And as you know, as God would have it, the venue that we at was a Caribbean restaurant. It's a black-owned business, and it kind of just it brought it all full circle back to kind of its like inaugural home, and allowed us to capture a lot of personal relationships. It was a little bit easy to access some people because Birmingham being a bigger place, there's a lot more layers to get to. It just felt right. So with 6 weeks to go before the actual day, we launched.
Yeah, I love, and I love, you know, one of the things you talked about, I mean, obviously you talked about the origins of International Men's Day, which I would definitely encourage people to look into if they haven't done. I think especially for organizations and you organizations, if you haven't done anything, I am talking to you this morning, right? So any organizations, if you haven't done anything, maybe do that work of looking into what were the origins of International Men's Day, you know, sort of like internationally here in the UK, etc. What did it look like? Because I think that's useful, and I think it helps to give legitimacy as well to the day and why it's important if people know where it's come from. But I love that you mention you know, that like Trinidad Tobago angle and the black owned business. And I know one of the things when I first spotted, because I only spotted this a few weeks ago, when I first spotted a post about the event, there was a description of the breakfast, and like you had me hooked when I heard what I can't remember what the breakfast was. I can't remember if it was like fried dumpling and something or other, but all roti or something. But I was like, what? You know, I was like, this is
Caribbean fusion breakfast. So we had a we had a twist on a cornmeal porridge, dried old bread and fritters.
That is so cool. For anybody that doesn't know, if you don't know, you need to get to know. I went round to my mum's house 2 days ago and she had made fritters. Fritters are like, it's such a part of like Caribbean heritage, honestly, obviously for many cultures as well. But so I love that you were bringing into it intersectionality, which actually, even for example, something like International Women's Day, and if we go into like feminism more broadly, sometimes, or I want to say accused of like not being intersectional enough, if that makes sense. The fact that one of the things I loved when I had the conversation with you was you were kind of like wanting to reach everyone. Do you know what I mean? Like all parts of the community. And so I love that you mentioned the intersectional thing, and also your faith as well, which is something that comes through sort of like loud and clear. I remember when we spoke, which there aren't many LinkedIn Live conversations even that I have where faith is like so front and center. And I love that you talk about the importance of your faith, even in being able to actually deliver this. Do you know what I mean? Like it's obviously a core part of who you are, which I think is you know, it's great. It's really great. Yeah, and it gives other people the permission to, right?
Well, that's it. I think it's not about saying look at me and what I do. It's about giving people that permission to talk. And a big thing about inclusion is it's not necessarily just about you. It's helping people understand it's okay to have the conversations, and it's okay to be different, and it's okay to open that up, because if we don't, if we exclude one thing, so a lot of the time religion is seen as a no. You know, you don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics, and you hear that quite a lot in different groups. But why not? If it's an important part of somebody's life, maybe it's a challenge that they're going through, that maybe the particular area of thing that they're going through means that it's either important to them or it's a conflict. It's a challenge, particularly in today's society when there's a lot of challenge around who we are and where we come from and where we belong, and it's part of that.
Yeah. Do you know what's really interesting? And I don't know if I mentioned this when we last spoke, but there's a really interesting piece of work around like how people hide different elements of themselves at work, right? And everybody does it, right? Men, women, you know, black, white, you know, LGBT, the whole, everybody does it to different extents. One of the areas that men often do it in the workplace, the element that men often hide, is actually around things like traditional Christian values. Is one of the things that men often almost like feel they have to suppress, which is quite interesting, you know. So the conversation around giving people that permission to express their faith is a really interesting one.
And I'm very, very open to lots of things. So it wasn't that it was just you know, me as a Christian doing the organization. The structure was formed with people of all faiths. So you know, there's people from Islam, there's people from Sikhism. There was a broad sector because it has to be inclusive. It can't focus on one thing, and being in the same room with people of different faiths helps you understand that even though it's International Men's Day, it's about celebrating everybody from everywhere.
Yeah. Men are not a monolith, right? As I always say, men are not a monolith. Okay, just it's still on the conference. Highlights from you. Was there a particular speaker or a particular session, or just maybe a particular moment, right, where you were like, this is what this was about, you know, this is why I did it. Do you know what I mean? Was there a particular highlight that stands out for you that you kind of almost like keep replaying in your mind?
It's going to be hard to find one. I think every single conversation that we had, so the in conversation on the sofa live, everyone was riveting in its own way, and it actually asked a lot more questions than it answered, which is great because the next conversations will all be what we take from there. So the follow-up to these will be those. It was amazing to hear the mayor speak. So without much kind of prompting, he wrote and gave a great speech from what he saw of not just the day, but what we were trying to do. And it felt really heartfelt. It wasn't just, here's a bio, read it out. He'd actually took time to go out and research and understand who we were, what the building was, what we were standing for. So that was amazing. I think there was a moment when we paused and we gave the fact of, you know, we gave some stats, and one of the ones we gave was that 84% of men only receive flowers when they pass. And we got to pause for a moment, and we gave men their flowers, you know, a physical flower. And there was almost this initial moment of silence. And yeah, it was heartwarming to see that lift of people like, oh, this is for me. And it was a big thing throughout the day. But I think one of the most difficult parts of the day, and also the one which highlighted why we needed to do it, was after the end of one of the panels, towards the end, there was a chap came on and he wanted to talk, and he talked. We overran massively. He spoke for about 10 minutes, but he spoke about, he didn't have a question. He just wanted to share his journey and what he'd been through. And you could see this was a person that was struggling. But the story he gave, you wouldn't hear men talking about it. You wouldn't talk about the things that he was saying he'd experienced and the challenges he's faced, how the system had failed him. And he was saying, like, I'm getting really emotional. And it was difficult from a hosting perspective, because holding the mic there, and I'm like, we're overrunning, what do we do? But I'm like, I want to give this an opportunity to hear it and let it go out there. But it just showed that the space that was created that day gave people the confidence to kind of bare their soul. And you know, I asked at the end, so we did film that, is that something you're okay with? And he says, yeah, I want people to hear it. I want people to know that men are going through this. And then, you know, we sat down, we invited him to our Tuesday groups, and we gave him a lot of kind of advice and support. And not just me, other organisations kind of approached us, look, this is what we do. How can we help? So that element of bringing everyone together and giving that space to talk and space to help was amazing.
That's incredible. Yeah. And it's interesting, you know, it often is those moments. I know, you know, as you know, that there's a couple of events that I run, but you know, it often isn't necessarily the speakers or a certain thing. It often actually is an individual that's come along, and when they share and you realize that how much the space has helped them, because I think that's when your why becomes it's like the manifestation of your why almost. You know what I mean? Like that person is embodying why you've done the thing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was it.
Yeah. Let's just talk about, because I know it hasn't all been like plain sailing in terms of, and it's the same, you know, whenever it comes to men's spaces. I mean, interestingly, even when I post about it, in fact, let me pause really quickly, and I'll finish this point and then I'll get back to Hardev's point. But we're going to go on to some of the challenges around when you want to create men's spaces. And it's, you know, often when I post about the importance and the need for men's spaces, they're often some of the more difficult posts on LinkedIn. You know, I'm most likely to get people arguing, you know, about, you know, why do we need it and all. When I post about the importance of spaces for men, right? And I want to get into potentially why that is next with you, Leighton. So let's just pick up what Deborah said here. I listened to a podcast a while back about men and masculinity, and the host spoke about men not saying I love you mates, their friends. And so he tried it, and his friends were put back by him saying that to them, but over time it became acceptable and formed a sense of stronger bonds and friendships. Yeah, that's I mean, you probably resonate with that, Leighton, in terms of that level of intimacy.
It is that, and I think it's normalizing it.
Yeah.
It's normalizing and saying it, and not having a, you know, a humorous follow up to that, or almost excusing it. You know, we do it all the time, and a lot of the time people go to shake my hands, and I'm like, no, we're not doing that. And it's like, bring them in, and you know, we embrace, because we need that connection. For some people, that might be the only connection they have in that day, in that week, in that month. And it just it creates a bond and a connection which says it's okay to be open.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And to be, like, you know, vulnerable, so to want to connect, you know, on that deeper level, a bit like that example that you gave about the individual that's sharing, you know, making it okay to kind of show that side of men, I guess, is really important. So let's talk about why is it important to have men's spaces, and how do we, you know, how do we respond to people that are maybe not supportive, or they think that there is a danger in it, or that we're doing people a disservice? Do you know what I mean? People that have an issue with it, how do we deal with that?
Well, I think the answer's already there, in that we create spaces for everyone, as we should do. So whether it's a space for a particular race, whether it's a space for a particular gender or how you identify, or whether it's for a particular interest. So why can't we have a space for men? And I think it's important. So when we do the toolbox talks on a Tuesday, there's a lot of guys of, first of all, it was a struggle to get men to come along, because the stigma of going to a group where men are going to talk about how they feel. But secondly, it was that piece of, one of the comments that we had a couple of weeks ago was from a guy, and he opened up about his experiences, and he says, I would never speak like this in front of a woman. It's like, well, why? It's because I might be seen as being weak, or, you know, I might be looked at as, you know, someone who's not strong enough to lead them. And that was great that he said it, but also sad that we live in a world where we feel we can't. And I think that's probably one of the challenges, one of the questions on the day, that a lot of time we ask what women want, and, you know, from men, and we'll say, well, we want vulnerability, we want leaders, and we want people, you know, men that can communicate. And I don't think we actually know, A, how to do that effectively, and B, how to receive it. So it's okay saying you want something, but when you get it, how do you receive that well? How do you not take that as so, for example, the leadership thing for me is always a challenge of, so we'd say that we want men to be leaders. What does that look like? What does it look like in a workspace? What does it look like in personal relationships? What does it look like in family life? And it's about communicating what's expected and how we're going to give that, so that we don't lose shape of the spaces. Because if men are already feeling vulnerable to go to a space and then they're questioned about it, we're going to put it back even further. And we have people that sign up to come along and kind of hang around outside and don't go. So to try and combat that, one of the things that we've done with the Tuesdays at Bank is to make the whole day a space where it's open to all groups to come along to do various different topics and various different things. So almost like a community centre, really. That's why we called it Community Bank. So within the space, our vision is that you'd have toolbox talks happening. You might have somebody playing dominoes. You might have some people that have just come to turn up to it, and it could be men and women, but there'll be a safe space where the men will be able to talk, and hopefully we'll be able to then go around and say, oh, what you're here for, and bring them in, so they don't feel like it's that I'm coming here for this, but I'm in this space where I can do it and be safe.
I love that. Yeah. And what was that called, did you say? Toolbox Talks?
Toolbox Talks. That's what we do every Tuesday at Bank between 6 and 8. And that's the space where we encourage men to come along and just talk. But it's a space where, you know, we sit, we break bread together, we talk. Sometimes people come and don't talk. But it's just having that brotherhood moment where you can just be yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a few things that you said there that I'll come back to in terms of you talked about, and I think this is an important one. You said something about the expectations that are put on men, particularly even sometimes coming from women, right? So we'll get into that, like talking about what that looks like and how that sometimes adds to the confusion and almost like stops the vulnerability, right? And we kind of like have the mixed messages. But when it comes to the spaces, one of the things that I posted about when I reflected on the spaces, and one of the things I said in a post a while ago was that sometimes when we think about men's spaces, I think people are often thinking of the private members clubs down in London, like the Garrick, right, where Boris Johnson and whoever's meeting, where power is being held and gate kept and all of that, right? But what we don't think about, and I think of this, and as I look down the road, I know that there used to be what was a working men's club right down the road, which is now, it was then transformed into like more of like a family place. But actually, these working men's clubs used to be places that working men, and working class men could go and just be, just be, hang, as you say, as brothers, do you know what I mean? Have conversations. And I almost think that in kind of like attacking men's spaces carte blanche, like the private members clubs, we've kind of almost like demonized all of men's space. Do you know what I mean? In doing that. And I just think that it's way more nuanced,
So there's lots of spaces for women that are created for women. They're exclusively for women.
Yeah.
And that's great because women need that space that, depending on whether it's just for a chance to get there and shout, or it's because there's a vulnerability from trauma or experience that they've been through and want to have that moment of sharing that. So we within our organization, we encourage that and we support that. And I know there's lots of people out there that do. But men don't get that same grace. They don't get the same there. And I liken it back to history. So throughout history, we've done that. Over the years, there were, whether it was a village in Africa, whether it was a village in Mexico, Japan, whether it was post-war in England, terraced houses, putting the washing out, women had those spaces. And men had space as well, because whether it was, again, tribal days and it was the men going out to hunt together, rites of passage, whether it was post-war England and the working men's club, there were spaces that weren't defined to be gender-based, but they just were, and it gave that chance to connect with people that would do that, and then they'd come together at some point and have those conversations. So that's what we'd be trying to just share now and say that having spaces which are for men is just as important spaces for women, but also how do we bring those together? So we've done it in the past and we plan to do it again. Restart that is bringing the women's groups and the men's groups together so we can talk about some of the things and ask those questions. So what do you want as women from a leader? What is it that you're expecting?
Yeah. Well, so let's get into that, right? And good morning, Sylvia Anacorso. Good morning. Sylvia's put a comment here, and it leads on to it links to what you were saying earlier, Leighton. So Sylvia said, "I'll believe our culture, especially our Western culture, absolutely glorify strength and power. Yeah, there are certain leadership traits, aren't they, that in the West we deem to be like, leadership like, and also masculine. We've coded certain traits as being masculine, and this belief infiltrates all aspects of our lives. Just talk about you said something, Leighton, about how women place expectations on men that mean, for example, that when, say, if a man then is being vulnerable or shows any signs of what we deem to be weakness, it's almost like they're penalized for it. Is that, do you think that's a fairly common
and I think
occurrence?
I think social media's got a lot to play in a lot of these things. So there's lots of words that are bandied around and used without actually knowing what they mean and what they're actually for. It then creates these moments of you'll see you go onto Instagram or TikTok and it'll be an expectation. We'll use leadership, say so from a woman looking in a man, they want a man that's a leader. What does that actually mean? Because even in kind of the corporate world in management, we get management and leadership wrong all the time. We don't always understand the difference and the nuances of each one. So if we can't get it right in a space where we can write it down and we can script it and we can train it, how do we do that in an interpersonal space? When is it, is leadership I'm going to, for example, arrange the date, take you there and do all the things that's expected for a man to lead in that space? When does it then become, well, actually now you're overstepping the mark and it's controlling? So I think there's a big conversation around what is leadership for men from a woman's perspective. And that's why the conversation has to be both ways.
Yeah, this is absolutely where I think, more conversation about what that looks like and expectations. And I think, women, really looking in the mirror. I mean, I've got some examples that I can share of this where I've seen. I used to watch, one of my guilty pleasures was Married at First Sight.
Okay.
Married at First Sight Australia in particular, because I think that's the sort of juicier one, right? But honestly, if any of those men, if they were emotional, if the women were brutal, like in a way that I was like we got this wrong. Like the women were absolutely brutal, and and the names that they would call them. So when you said about like on social media, I heard that the term sassy was being used on social media about men that displayed certain behaviors that were doing. I was like, what is going on? So I think you're you're absolutely right here. We've got a comment here from Adrienne. Good morning, Adrienne. Adrienne, I think I owe you a message, right? So let me do. I've had a busy week. That's why I haven't replied to you, my dears. Apologies. Yes, in a way that vulnerability is penalized, but so is the courage that's required to be vulnerable. Yeah, absolutely. Good morning. It does take courage to be vulnerable. Absolutely. So I love your thought there, Leighton, about men and women having conversations. Because do you know what? I feel like, so the women for, a good, what is it now, 60 years or so have been studying, women's rights, women's lib, etc., the role of women in society. Men are doing that more so, which is great. I think you're right, actually. Now the conversation needs to be about the interplay, right? How they coexist, and like hetero,
I think that the work's not been done, but there's a lot of it being done in the women's space, and it's took a while to get to that. But if you only do one side of the coin, then what happens there? You have to look at both aspects, and now men are trying that. They're looking at these things and thinking, well, what do we do? And like I said, there's a little bit of loss of how do we share vulnerability without it then being either weaponized or seen as and categorized as something. And what level of vulnerability is acceptable? So one of the questions that we asked is emotion and vulnerability punished in a professional space when it comes to men? So I think there'd be more space held for women in a professional space that were feeling sad or showing emotion than there would be for men. And how do we change that narrative to say that it's right for everybody? And how do we encourage people to do that without fear of retribution?
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Just
Really
wanted to say is that
interesting.
if we're really real about it, it's football. So in football, men score, they run up, they hug, they laugh. Sometimes they're kissing each other, they're rolling around on the floor. That's masculine because it's a male-dominated sport, and men are doing that. When they lose, or I'm a Wolves fan, so it happens a lot for us right now. There's a lot of tears, and Ronaldo, Gascoigne, two very big figures, were on the pitch crying. That's because they were given space to be human, given space to show the vulnerability. So I don't think it's the fact that men can't do it or don't want to do it, but what's the space for them to do it? How do we allow them to do it? And how do we encourage that afterwards? And what support do we give once it's happened? So I think we've almost got to change the narrative of going away from it's okay to talk. Men do talk, believe it or not. We talk a lot. I do a lot. What space are we giving them to do it? Where are we creating it? And how are we holding it?
Yeah. And this links on to we're going to sort of like start to wrap things up. Because I know people are always saying that they've got 9 o'clock meetings, and I always run over way past 9 o'clock, right? But I love you talking about men talking, and I do sometimes think as women. I remember I think I shared a post on it, but a few months ago I was in Starbucks. Don't judge me, anybody, but I was in Starbucks, and there was two couples had come in. So 2 men, 2 women, and they were talking, and it was almost like each time somebody asked one of the guys a question, the woman would answer for him. And I could feel myself just thinking, will you just shut up and let this man talk? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, let the man talk. And there is something about the role we play, something I often talk about, even on International Women's Day. I talk to women about giving men the space to hold emotion, to kind of advocate for themselves when it comes to emotional issues and relational issues in the workplace. Like, let them speak and like deal with these situations themselves. So the one thing that I wanted to talk to you about is, how can we as women be better allies for the men in our lives or our colleagues in the workplace?
I think it's been available in spaces which are comfortable for men. I think it's about being really clear in the communication. So if something's expected, let's be clear what that is. Like as we used earlier, if it's about leadership, what does that look like? So rather than just having a word or a phrase, let's actually get into what that looks like. Because we would do, if we were contracting professionally, we'd be very clear about what our expectations are moving forward. And it sounds a little bit robotic at times, but by having that clear contracting, you're going to be able to get into the deeper side of the conversation. And that's not just in a personal relationship, that's in the wider stratosphere as well. So when it comes to children, when it comes to managing expectations, what is it that we're there? So if you have an expectation, let's use those things about, if your expectation is that I expect a man to open a car door for me every time, don't assume he's going to know that, because women's rights have got to the point where, can we do that now? Are men allowed to do these things? Are we going to get told off for, I'm an independent woman, I don't need you to do that? Some will want that.
Not by me.
So just ask the question. Don't be afraid to ask the question, and don't be afraid as women to say, do you know what? I really like this. So I always say to them, I love receiving flowers. So if you want to get them for me, that's great, because I'm kind of setting the expectation of, I want them. Not a demand for it, but to say I'm okay to receive it, because there might be that confusion of like, oh, how's a man going to feel receiving flowers. So I'm very open, and I encourage all men to ask the question and all women to explore that and say, these are the type of things that I like. And the Gottmans talk a lot about this in things like love maps, of being really clear of what expectations are and mapping these things out and getting to know what makes somebody tick. So, you know, if their best friend is this person and they're like this, then find that out about them so that you can connect on a deeper level.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you talked about the Gottmans. We could have gone deep today, Leighton. I didn't realize you were into the Gottmans. For anybody that doesn't know who the Gottmans are, and I haven't heard the term love maps. I've heard obviously of love languages, which is what I started thinking about. So just explain to anybody that hasn't maybe heard of the Gottmans or doesn't know what like love maps are. Just explain that really briefly for us.
So I come across the Ottomans through an Instagram post and found them on YouTube, and they class themselves as the foremost relationship experts in the world. So it's a man and woman, and they've studied, I don't know the number, but thousands of relationships over years, and have looked at what are the common things and what are the things that affect relationships from a positive way and from a negative way. And it's not just, oh, we've seen 5 people, it's thousands of people over years and seeing the things that they're. So they have lots of things. I mean, they're American, so a lot of the terms are quite corny. They've got the 4 horsemen of a relationship and the 4 things that if these happen in your relationship, fix it or it's finished. But the love maps piece is where you almost, again, it's contracting, it's sitting down and understanding about your partner in a deeper level. So, you know, who was your childhood friend? Who are your best friends now? Not just where do you like to eat, but what's your favorite foods? What are the things that really you don't like? And it's understanding all the intricate things that over time can affect relationships. So if there's something about a relationship which is really important to you, map it out, talk about it, set the expectation, and then it's going to be really clear. Like I said, contracting in business, you'd have terms and conditions set out. You're almost giving it a playbook of what to do. And it was interesting on one of the panels, somebody said that for him, emotional communication and literacy. So emotional literacy was the communication between him and his wife of when he needs space. She knows what that means. She knows it's not him withdrawing and doesn't want to talk to her. He just wants a moment of where he's quiet, and that space for him gives him the capacity to then give her what she needs. And those are the things that you love map. Paul Brunson recently did one as well. He did his own love map, and he did it slightly differently. Rather than it being something that you write down, it was drawing pictures. So drawing pictures of things, important things in your life, of where you've been, where you are now, where you want to go to give a visual representation of your love map.
There's so many things that I love about that, but I think it's probably because, and it links back to Sylvia. I know Sylvia put something in here about I heard someone talking about how primal biology still influences our men-women relationships, and that probably links to, you know, there are lots of theories about things that, you know, affect how we interact, etc., as men and women. But what I love about what you said, it almost links to what Tom was saying. Good morning, Tom Gold. LinkedIn's answer to Bear Grylls, as I call him, right? So good morning, Tom. It talks about the term emotional coherence, and it linked it, you know, that example that you're explaining there about somebody talking about, you know, their emotional needs and the emotional literacy. There's something there about, you know, getting the clarity so that we connect our emotions with, you know, what we need, you know, when we do, whether that's even silence, right? Do we need time and space for silence, or actually do we need that time and space to share something? Do you know what I mean?
And
there's the
word I completely kind of concur with the word vulnerability. And there's a colleague who runs something called the Study of Men, and he was very passionate about the word vulnerability. And he said, so when we talk about being vulnerable, we're actually saying that we're allowing ourselves to be exposed to the possibility of harm. And is that the right word to use? And it took me back a little bit of what, you know, when you think about the word vulnerability, we are saying it's okay to harm me. I'm allowing myself to be vulnerable. So I've never heard it phrased, emotional coherence, but that's a really interesting way. And I think again, this is why the conversations are important to talk about. As a man, do we want to be vulnerable, or do we want to talk about the emotional literacy and the communication side of it, which is a different way to phrase it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And the thing about the love map, and there's almost like different versions of this. I feel like from, like, say for example, a workplace context, I know what some organizations do well is they really delve into, for example, somebody's learning styles, so different like learning communication styles, etc. And this is where, kind of linking back to what Sylvia was saying, but for me there's something about we can overlay the gender on it, but at the end of the day, we're all individuals, and it links back to what you were saying, Leighton, around the importance of contracting with individuals and being really clear about what they need. So it's almost like if we just strip back the gender, we're all individuals, right? And we all have preferences around, whether your preference is that you like flowers or you like for doors to be open for you, etc. Regardless of the gender, and I guess getting clear on that. And for women, any women that are listening to this, I would say, do that exercise. For the men, if you have got men in your life, do that exercise in terms of sitting down with them and saying, what sort of support do you need from me? What does that look like? How can I better
It
understand
gives you
and
a
be available
blueprint.
for you? Yeah.
It's a blueprint of, on a bad day when things aren't going well, let's go back to this blueprint and say, do you know, this is the thing that we've agreed works for us, or works for you, or works for me. And on those days, we can kind of just say, when it's the worst arguments in the world, you've threw your toys out of the pram, you've, whatever you've done to kind of express yourself, but then you can center back on, well, this is what we agreed works for us, or this is what I need in that moment. And it might be that they need space. And it's something that's took me a while to understand this, because I'm a person that I want to resolve it now. I don't want to give an opportunity for it to fester, when actually some people want the complete opposite, and they want time to go away and reflect on it. So it's, how do you contract that? So and then again, it's the same in talking spaces. It might be not right to approach it then, but it might be right. Okay, so let's have a moment to think about this. I need a moment. Can we give this an hour, or let's come back tomorrow? Because then if you've got somebody who's has a kind of an anxious attachment to that moment, you're letting them know, we are going to come back to it, we are going to talk about it. And it's just, like I said, learning styles and so forth. It's the same with love languages and attachment styles. Once you get a little bit of understanding about what makes somebody, you can contract the same way you would in any business. And that's the same in like in spaces. It's the same in relationships. It's the same with your children. You can do the same with your children in a very simple way. So I'd encourage everybody to, if you want to help men, you want to be an ally for men, is try and understand them a little bit more.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't say it better myself, Leighton. And we're going to wrap things up. So again, I want to really congratulate you on what you've achieved. I know it probably hasn't sunk in yet, right? So you've not probably fully had that realization of, do you know what, we actually did it. So I want to really congratulate you, and again, give you your flowers for having done that. Where can people?
I was gonna say, I'm always when people say these things to me, I'm always grateful, but I always have to mention that it wasn't just a solo effort. There's a team behind us. It really wouldn't have been possible without Jonathan, Leon, and TLG, and the support that they gave, the space, the organisation, and our plans for the future. So whilst I'm grateful for my flowers, I also have to give them to all the men and women that helped put this together.
Amazing. And what are your plans next, and where can people connect with you and find out more about what you're doing?
So everything that was done on the day was filmed. We have 12 hours of footage. I think about 4 terabytes of content. So that's currently being edited and created into online content. So that'll be short form, long form. There'll be some documents written. We're going to have so all our talks on the day were in conversation. our next species, the next conversation. So
Yeah.
we'll be reviewing the content to get out of that what we want the next topics to be. And then that will be online. Every Tuesday we do our Talking Space Toolbox talks. That's at Bank in Wolverhampton, 6 till 8. And everything will be on our kind of social channels, whether that's at IMD conference on LinkedIn or Instagram, and at Work in Process again on LinkedIn and on Instagram.
Okay. At Work in Progress on LinkedIn or Instagram, and at IMD conference on LinkedIn.
Or if you put Leighton Campbell in, I always pop up quite high in Google, and you'll see me there and all the different channels that we're in.
Yeah, amazing, brilliant. And if anybody wants to get in touch with Leighton, to whether it's coming into your organizations to talk about how you can create spaces for men or work with your men's networks, please do get in touch with Leighton, either I guess here on LinkedIn or via Instagram as well. Leighton, thank you so much for joining the conversation, because I know you're still coming down from the mountain, right? So thank you so much for joining, and to everybody that joined as well, thank you for being a part of this conversation. Please do take it back into your organizations and help to maybe start to think about, okay, what are we going to do next? If we didn't do anything this year, what are we doing next year? How do we get somebody like Leighton in at this stage to kind of help us do more to support the men that we've got around us? So thank you everybody for watching, and if you're watching on the replay, thank you for taking 51 minutes out of your day to join this conversation. Thank you again, Leighton.
Thank you.
All right, take care everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.